Twitter, or if you have no self-respect, X. A wonderfully diverse place that accommodates all forms of abject hate and stupidity. Now, I've had the misfortune of engaging with these beautiful people recently, trying to engage with people online and getting an idea of the type of thoughts rummaging around their heads. Suffice to say, my soul is more hollow because every day it becomes more and more clear that truth does not matter in public discourse. I'm not sure if we have ever been more reactionary than we are today, and the only comfort that I really have from this is seeing the amount of socialist organization popping up more and more across the country. But I thought maybe today we can take a look at some of the incredible nonsense being propagated in this incredible, ever-present bastion of collective consciousness. Let's take the latest word from our good friend and one of the most disgusting members of the Israeli delegation, Randy Fine. Randy Fine made some comments recently that are really something. So he goes on X and says, if they force us to choose, the choice between Muslims and dogs is not a difficult one. Now, why did the sentient tub of lard that is Randy Fine say this thing? Well, he was responding to a tweet made by this woman right here. Finally, NYC is coming to Islam. Dogs definitely have a place in society, just not as indoor pets. Like we've said all along, they are unclean. This was, maybe to Randy Fine's surprise, a joke. A joke making fun of people's Islamophobic fears and hate against Zoran's leadership in New York City. Not only is Fine's comment on its own flat out disgusting, but it highlights a tried and true tactic that the Republicans love to utilize, and that is operating under the assumption that those on your ideological opposite are incapable of making jokes. It's a very effective tactic and one they use all the time, and they know it's reliable because even when you point out to the servile dogs in the replies that it is a joke, they'll still come back around and reject the possibility of it being a joke, or say some dumb shit like, well, that's what Muslims think anyway, so it's true regardless. Got him. It's really incredible the level of horse blinders these people will put up to this sort of stuff. But yeah, Fine just kept doubling down, posting AI don't tread on me with a dog pictures on it over and over again.
Now, I think it's unfortunate that mainstream Muslims want to force us to make that choice. If you don't want to have a dog, don't have a dog. Even if what I had said was negative in some way, it's racist to refer to it.
Truth just does not matter to these people, and they can't concede that they made a mistake because God forbid any of them faces any level of accountability whatsoever. But there's another thing about Fine's comments that I want to highlight too. Let's assume for a moment that the woman's comment was made in all seriousness. That would certainly be a radical view, for sure. But is that how all Muslims are? No, certainly not. This type of extremist application to an entire group of people really only works against people who have zero exposure to the sorts of groups that they are talking about. The fact is that most people are normal. Most people just want to have a normal life where they can take care of themselves and their families. Obviously, there's always extremists, but that applies to any group of anyone or anything. I mean, this would be like taking one of Rabbi Shmuley's tirades and then assuming that every Jew in the world also is as much of a genocide-loving pig as he is.
What I was trying to say before the baboon interrupted me was that
baboon?
The top Holocaust historian in the country.
You're calling
Here we
Jews
go again.
monkeys and apes? Disgusting. How vile are you? Did
You
just
murder
call a
Muslims
Jew a
for
baboon?
fun. You don't get to talk about racism. You murder Palestinian children for land. You're a disgusting genocidal pig. So you don't get to talk about racism and anti-Semitism. Oh, poor little victim. And by the way, I got, 5 seconds in before the baboon interrupted me.
Or seeing how Jeffrey Epstein was a Jewish supremacist and assuming that every Jew also was a Jewish supremacist. It's not true. It's stupid, disgusting, and completely cynical. Fundamentally, it's also anti-American. One of the things that I've always felt that is one of the greatest principles of America is the idea of individuals being prosecuted for their own crimes. Individual punishments. In this country, the crimes of a single individual are not supposed to be ascribed to the rest of the people who belong to the same group that that individual does. Similarly to what I said about extremist views in Judaism. If I were to take the Mormon church shooter and say that all people in MAGA are equally as violent and hate-filled, that would also be wrong. We don't do collective punishment in this country, or at least we're not supposed to. Moving on to the next big story from this week, the tragic shooting that happened on Monday the 16th in Rhode Island. At 2:30, Robert Dorgan opened fire at Lynch Arena in Pawtucket during a children's hockey. Dorgan ended up killing 2 family members and hospitalized 3 others, ultimately coming to a close when Dorgan died of a self-inflicted gun wound.
Gunfire erupting at an ice rink in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. This video capturing the frantic moments as high school hockey players skate to safety, racing to escape the bullets.
While this incident is obviously a horrific tragedy in and of itself, conservatives could not wait to capitalize on this event. For those of you who aren't avid readers of the New York Post or maybe Newsmax or even Fox News, all highly esteemed sources of news media, it was revealed that the shooter was indeed a trans individual, going by the name of Roberta instead of Robert. Republicans did not wait a single second to weaponize this incident for their own gains. They instantly weaponized it to push the idea that mass shootings are perpetrated en masse by mentally ill and disturbed trans individuals. Now, obviously this person was sick in the head, but not because they were trans, but for fucking shooting their own family members and others at a children's hockey game. But no, the right is extremely lasered in and focused on an extremely small minority group within this country because they really hate that they get so horny at the thought of a woman with a cock that they could suck on.
Let me be clear. I am not gay. I never have been gay.
They get so mad that their cocks get so fucking hard from that thought that they're like, I have to kill everybody who belongs to this group because then there will be nobody for me to get horny of. It's pretty amazing. You can say all you want to these people, that trans people only compromise 0.1% of all mass shootings in this country, and that if that's the case, maybe there's something more fundamental going on as far as the reason why there's so much mass shootings and an epidemic of violence going on in this country. But no, these people, Republicans, and their adoring fans that jump on the bandwagon, have no interest in actually solving the underlying issues that create such incidents in our country. In fact, making sure that we are a violent country helps their cause, because when a minority group that they don't like conducts a crime, they can rely on their base not knowing any better and say that violence is occurring because of those individual minority groups of people. And let's play around with theoreticals for a second too. If it was a white guy and the New York Post ran some headline that said something like, white mass shooter kills X amount of people, I feel like a lot of people would be pretty disgusted by that. That would sound pretty bad, right? I gotta believe that most people would be disgusted by that sort of headline. When gun violence is so widespread in this country, honing in on the identity of the shooters is completely counterproductive. And to go further on this, for the hate-mongering data autists, let's play around with the scenario for a little bit. Trans people commit 0.1% of all mass shootings from 2013 to 2025, while they comprise around 1% of the entire nation's population. Meanwhile, 98% of all mass shootings are conducted by cisgender men, who comprise around 47% of the nation's population. Therefore, trans people commit disproportionately less mass shootings than their share of the population, and cisgender men commit disproportionately more mass shootings than their share of the population. Now, I'm not bringing this up to say that like all mass shootings are because of cisgender men or anything like that. Not at all. That's not my fucking point, okay? That would be just as stupid than saying that trans people are the reason for mass shootings in this country. But I am using it to show you this, that whenever one of these incidents are committed by a trans person, it is always, always, always weaponized by the right to try and demonize and demean this minority group of the population. I mean, trans people in this country are 4 times more likely to be victims of violent crimes than the average person, and are much more likely to be victims of homelessness than the average person in this country as well. Again, it's disgusting propaganda that is designed to obfuscate their followers from paying attention to what actually matters, or the actual reasons as to why these things occur in our country. As a quick aside, though, I do have to give credit to MAGA, because their commitment to DEI is truly impressive. I was already impressed with the existence of Lady MAGA from that one terrifying Jubilee video.
Did you mean Barack Hussein Obama?
But now they also have a trans Nazi among their ranks, and to them I say bravo. Truly, bravo to you guys, all right? Good work, keep it up. Really making a difference out there. But the fact of the matter is that we do actually have an epidemic of gun violence in this country, and violence beyond that as well. But it's not because of one singular person's identity. At its core, it's because we have an unlimited access to guns and increasingly limited access to mental health services, while the government does their absolute best to try and drive the populace as insane as humanly possible, all to serve the interests of their overlords. It is a divide and conquer strategy, and we are the ones being conquered. Do not mistake that. Now, my favorite little Daily Wire dog, Matt Walsh.
Now I feel a certain kind of connection and like ethical responsibility here, because I do feel like this person is in some ways me.
You're just walking around and you're just doing whatever you like.
Is an endless well of nonsensical white nationalism that never fails to impress. Now, Walsh goes on racist tirades on almost an hourly basis on Twitter, but I want to highlight one recent tweet of his that he made that I think is pretty revealing in a number of areas. Walsh says, if there is no white culture, then there is no black culture, and for the exact same reasons. But nobody says that there is no black culture, which means nobody really believes that there is no white culture. Now, this tweet is very stupid for a number of reasons, but let's start with this basic truth. There is no uniform black culture in this country, and there is no uniform white culture in this country either. None whatsoever. And any honest person who engages in the social component of existence would be able to reason this out. There is no white uniform culture in the United States. White people in the United States are far too much of a diverse collection of peoples to fantasize that there is some unifying culture among them. Before I really get into it, it is objectively true that whiteness, as Matt Walsh and his cohorts try to describe it, is a social construct. In essence, it is fascism, because it is a superstructure myth that is designed to maintain the current social order as it exists. It is something that is used to define the in-group of white versus the out-group of non-white. And it has been deployed against many groups of immigrants that are now considered white, time and again in our not-too-distant past. It's utilized to justify land theft, wage suppression, slavery, and all forms of discrimination that benefits only the capital-owning class at the end of the day. Everybody in the in-group gets a couple scraps, but really, it's for that. For example, when Italian immigration started to occur en masse in this country, they were labeled as non-whites, and they were discriminated against horrific, okay? Same goes for the Slavs, Greeks, the Poles, the Irish, and so on and so forth. They were treated poorly and provided with subpar housing, and were subject to lower wages than their white counterpart. In today's world, those people are now considered part of the in-group of white, because the out-group of brown people from Muslim nations or Latin American nations are the ones that are up for the chopping block now. But even within the current in-group of white, it's still not a unifying culture. There's an Italian-American culture, there's a French-American culture, there's an Irish-American culture, and so on. Go to Baltimore, and you have Greektown. Go to New York, and you have Little Italy. Go to Coney Island, and you will be shocked to discover that there's an entire populace of people who are born and raised there who have a thick Russian accent. And believe me, they do exist because I went to school with a lot of them.
Brighton Beach, nicknamed Little Odessa after the Ukrainian city on the Black Sea, boasts the largest Russian-speaking population in the United States. Here, sometimes you feel you need a translator or a tour guide like David Gabarsky.
To reduce these various cultures to a singular one on the basis of purely skin tone is not only stupid, but it erases the history of these people and the various struggles and cultural output that they have produced over time. Cultures develop as a result of shared history and the customs and practices that develop over time from that shared history. There is no shared history or shared culture amongst the white people within the United States of America. I mean, really, like a black Texan and a white Texan have much more in common with each other than a white Texan and a white New Yorker as far as culture is concerned. It is ridiculous to assume that there is a unifying culture that connects those two people more so than the people who live within their own fucking state. The only unifying white culture that you could say exists in this country is that of racism, because beyond that, there is nothing. Detractors might say like, oh, well, there's a common lineage throughout the cultures and countries of Europe. Never mind that there has almost never been a period in European history where these countries were not at constant war with each other. I mean, we did literally have 2 world wars, right? I mean, if you believe that like both world wars were products of a cultural civil war of sorts, you should go to like a neurologist or something. Honestly, because I don't know what's going on with you, maybe a psychiatrist, but there is something wrong with your understanding of history if you've read books and think this way. Take a notion of there being a black culture. There is no black culture in the way that Matt Walsh and his cohorts describe it. Not one that is defined on the lines of skin color. What there is are a variety of cultures of people who have black skin in this country. For instance, when I think people on the left refer to a black culture in this country, they're referring to what I'll call heritage African Americans. Those people who belong to descendants of slaves. Heritage African Americans do have an identifiable culture, complete with cultural outputs, most principally with jazz and rap. Now, why is it that they have their own unique culture, whereas there is no white culture in the ways that I've described? Well, it's because heritage African Americans have a shared history in this country. Even after the hundreds of years of chattel slavery, African Americans were excluded from the rest of American society through such things as Jim Crow laws, segregation, and more recent practices such as redlining. They were forced to develop their culture separately from the rest of America. Mind you that in that time, there was still discrimination of whites in this country against the groups that I described earlier, such as the Irish, the Italians, the Slavs, the Poles, yada, yada, yada. But heritage African Americans did develop their own culture in this country. But it isn't a black culture as Walsh describes. More recent immigrants that have come to this country from predominantly black nations do not share the same shared history as heritage African Americans. Nigerian Americans bring their own culture, Jamaican Americans bring their own culture, Somali Americans bring their own culture, and so on. They have their own cultures that they bring with them, build communities, and then they develop over time. But Walsh can't think of culture as separate from race. And he hopes that all of his followers can also believe that same thing. Maybe if the Irish were green and Italians were purple, him and his fellow lizard brain friends could interpret what the fuck I'm saying. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding amongst a lot of people in this country as to what culture is and how it develops. And that is weaponized by people like Walsh to suit their disgusting aims. Culture is something that develops as a result of a shared history. And the fact of the matter is that while the nation does have a sort of singular shared history, that history is not solidified purely off the basis of black versus white. There are many different histories that comprise both black and white peoples in this country. And there is a unifying American culture, whatever that means to you. Be it music, food, or religious belief, there's an endless amount of intersection between black and white people in the cultural outputs that they claim. We got Luke Combs, we got Darius Rucker, we got Pastor Billy Graham, and we got Minister Martin Luther King. Both black and white people share the bounties of black-originated Southern barbecue, but trying to split American culture on the basis of race is contradictory to how people engage in society, and contradictory to what has occurred in history. It's stupid, it's counterproductive, and ultimately, this type of thinking will only lead to a self-inflicted wound amongst those who adhere to it.
I don't know who the bad guys are, so I just have to shoot everyone, it feels like.
You're the bad guy.
That's all I got for today. God bless you all. Thank you for watching.